On blast.
This is Ball on Blast, part of the On Blast Podcast Network. Available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you like it, then subscribe and tell your friends. Holla.
On blast.
Thank you. You're far too kind for tuning in once again to a little thing we like to call the Ball on Blast Podcast. As always, my name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by my guy, Andrew Webster. Webby, what is good?
Yo, it's a good Thursday night. Lot going on tonight on the TV in terms of sports. And I think first, before we get into the basketball talk, we got to congratulate the Boston Red Sox. I know we had that conversation about how washed baseball is. But again, like I say, that outfield deservedly so winning. That outfield of Benintendi, Betts, and Bradley Jr. I'm happy for them.
I can't say that I watched much of the World Series, but I am happy for David Price. I was always a big David Price guy.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for David Price to get that win and kind of like shut some people up. So that was kind of cool.
So you didn't stay up until 4 a.m. to watch the 18-inning baseball game?
Hell no. In fact, I forgot it was on. I was watching basketball, forgot it was on, then flipped over, saw it was on, didn't care, started watching the Joe Budden podcast while I was editing. Finished an episode of that, flicked back over, was like, hold on, this game's still on? I'm like, there's no way I would have been watching this, like 0% chance. And went to bed like knowing it was on, like not a chance.
I tried to make it, but on Friday night I got into the sauce a little.
Nothing wrong with that.
With some buddies, and I was in Toronto this weekend, and I actually was hanging out with some people, and I tried staying up and just fell right asleep. Couldn't do it.
All good, my dude. You know who has been keeping people up lately? The Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
Because they are giving people fits. They are doing work to start the season. Raptors off to a 7-1 start. And, you know, this is where we're going to start our turn up, turn down segment, Webby. And as always, for those in case you're brand new to the Ball on Blast podcast, where we talk everything NBA, the turn up, turn down segment works like this. We give a hot take, and then it's either turn up, which equals good, or turn down, which equals bad. Super simple, right?
Real easy.
So, Raptors off to a 7-1 start, as I mentioned. Of course, Kawhi getting a lot of the headlines. Serge and Pascal have been breakout stars of the early season. But there's one man that happens to be leading the league in assists, while also scoring 18 points per on 51% shooting. Webby, I'm asking you, Kyle Lowry is the real Raptors MVP? Turn up or turn down?
Turn it down. The real Raptors MVP is Kawhi Leonard, man.
Okay.
I love the kind of almost rejuvenation that Kyle Lowry's had this season. I think we both thought he was in for some big things with the change to the lineup and bringing in a new coach. We thought, Angry Larry was going to do some things, and he's really performed well. And the assist numbers are amazing.
Yeah.
We know he can score. We know he can shoot. We know he can lead. But the real difference with this Toronto Raptors team is having a top 5 player in the NBA on their team.
It is.
And I'm sure we'll talk about DeRozan because he's been playing great. But listen, Kawhi Leonard is Kawhi Leonard, all right? And I think that when you pair him with a guy like Lowry, another defensive-minded, tough dude, like you're going to see him flourish. But the MVP of this team is one of the best 5 players in the league, and that's Kawhi Leonard.
Now, here's the thing, right, Webby? And I agree with you, right? I'm also going to turn down on this. Kyle Lowry is not the MVP of the team because, obviously, you're talking about a top 5 guy, but in a top 5 guy in Kawhi Leonard, obviously. But here's the thing. Kyle Lowry, especially in this early going of the early part of the season, you got Kawhi Leonard resting 2 out of the 8 games that they played so far this year, and things really have fallen upon Kyle Lowry, the point guard, to kind of lead the way, set that example. He's getting Serge the ball where he needs it. He's getting Pascal the ball where he needs it. Obviously feeding Danny Green, who's a great shooter and working well so far this season. The thing with Kyle, I feel like he's the heart and soul of the team. You know what I mean? Kawhi is definitely the best player, but I think this team goes when Kyle Lowry's going, when he's locked in. We talk about it a lot. and I know he's your Philly guy, and you probably know the signal too, but when Kyle Lowry comes out early on and he knocks down that deep, deep three,
Yeah.
you know it's going to be one of those games, right? You know it's like the Kyle Lowry game. And while, again, Kawhi has been amazing this season when he's played, Kawhi Leonard is showing you the levels between good and great, you know, the difference between a two-way player and all that. But when I'm seeing Kyle Lowry take charges, when I'm seeing Kyle Lowry, you know that he's coming down the court, and in that last game against Philly, for example, right? And Kawhi's made a great play where he made the steal off of Ben Simmons,
Right.
then fed Siakam, but then the next possession, Kyle Lowry can sense, you know, Kawhi's in this game. Kawhi's feeling it. And what's Kyle do? Comes right down the floor, feeds Kawhi. Kawhi hits a three to bury it.
Oh,
I don't know, man.
listen, there's no question about it. Like, he's the leader of the team, but MVP I'm not so sure of. The other thing about about Kyle Lowry is we've seen him do this early on in seasons before. We've seen him put up really good numbers, really elite numbers in the first quarter of seasons before. But that's not what Kyle's about. For the Raptors to be successful, Kyle Lowry has to be Kyle Lowry. I agree with you about that. But he's got to be Kyle Lowry in April, May, June.
For sure. And I think my only argument here for Kyle Lowry being the MVP of the Raptors early season is just the fact that while you're resting Kawhi, that's putting a lot on Kyle Lowry's shoulders, right?
And
in terms of scoring.
There's got to be times later on in the season where Kyle's got to rest. Because we've seen this story play out before of him putting it all out there in the first 4 or 5 months of the season, and then down the stretch in the playoffs, fading, you know?
Totally. No, I totally agree with you, right? And it's been such an interesting season so far for Kyle because, as we mentioned, right, of course Kawhi's resting, but also there's been injuries in the backcourt, right? Fred VanVleet's been banged up. DeLon Wright's been hobbled as well. He played a bit better in the last game, but the point guard depth hasn't really been there early, which means so much more falls on the shoulders of Kyle Lowry. He's playing massive minutes, leading the team in minutes as well. I mean, again, Kawhi's definitely the best player, but I'm almost about to call Kyle Lowry the early season MVP just because he's been there soldiering it through night in, night out, playing at such a high clip. And at the end of the day, right, as seamless as the transition's been for Kawhi and Danny Green, I'd put a lot of that on Kyle Lowry, the point guard, just in terms of, like, you know, making sure everyone's getting fed, if that makes sense, right? He's giving Serge the ball where Serge needs it, and we're seeing Serge have a great
Unbelievable
year, and a lot of that is Kyle. So it's been interesting so far. But
well, I would
Rap's
say
about to get a big test.
Right? I would say that you're sounding like you're turning up on this.
I know. I might have convinced myself here. Is that weird? Is that weird? I might have thought the
No,
other way, and then I turned myself. That's weird, right?
Nothing wrong about that. I mean, it's great, and like again, both of us love seeing Kyle play at the utmost capacities of what we know he can play like, and that's awesome. But you just want him to play like this when the games get tighter and longer, and it's a little tougher, and that's why you have Kawhi Leonard. I think that if they make a playoff run, to have a fresh, spry Lowry down the stretch is going to be important.
Definitely true, and interesting times for the Toronto Raptors for sure. As a lot of their early season sked has been at home, and they're about to head out on the road, and things will get interesting for the Raptors. They got the West Coast swing coming up. They play Phoenix. By the time you're hearing this, they're playing Phoenix on Friday night, followed up with the Lakers on Sunday, Utah on Monday, and then West Coast trip wraps up in Sacramento next Wednesday. So, if you're looking at the
no gimmies. There's no
but
gimmies.
You want the Raptors to get at least 3 of those games, no?
Phoenix, Lakers, Utah,
and Sacto.
And that's 3.
Here's the thing, though, too.
Or that's 5. Listen, Sacramento's been playing real good.
They have been. And here's the thing, too. There's a lot of talk about Kawhi Leonard still going to sit out the back-to-back. So the assumption is he'll play against the Lakers, and then we'll sit out against Utah.
Utah.
Are you okay with this plan where Kawhi is sitting out back-to-backs, the second half of back-to-backs early on in the year?
100%. He played 9 games last season.
Okay. It's simple for you. I like that it's just firm. Yep, no problem.
No question about it, bro. Like the goal of this season for the Raptors isn't to have a great regular season or to put together a stretch of 20 straight wins. No. The goal of this season is to win the NBA championship, which is a real, make the NBA championship would be an attainable goal. Win it is there. You can do it, but you're not going to win the NBA championship by playing a second night of a back-to-back in November.
No, it's true.
Right? So I think the whole the whole news cycle around Kawhi sitting back-to-backs or that take that, what do we get him for if he can't play back-to-backs and what does that mean about his long-term? I think that if he wants to sit, man, you let him sit. No. I mean, that's tough to come back after not playing for a full year.
Also, too, I'll be 10,000% honest with you, right? As a fan, purely as a fan, and I'll say this for people who might not be familiar with the podcast, but one of the things I always like to say is that I have two ways that I look at things, right? There's a way that's as a fan, which is completely irrational, right?
Yeah, right.
And then there's obviously I work in sports television. I'm an intelligent person that knows shit about sports, right?
Right.
And so there's two different ways to think about it. And so, obviously, as a fan, selfishly, you want to see Kawhi Leonard play every single game possible in a Raptors uniform because you don't know how many games he'll end up playing. So, selfishly, I want to see him suit up against everybody this year, right? But now when you take a step back and let's say the day job Shelley, the producer Shelley, right, of sports television, you're able to critically think and understand the fact that, it's not a joke when people are talking about championship aspirations for the Toronto Raptors. You're watching them play and you're seeing oh no, this team fully 1,000% healthy can match up with anybody in the league. And yes, I said anybody in the league. I'm not saying that they'll beat Golden State, but I'm saying they could give Golden State a go, right? And I'm not even, that's not hyperbole, that's not whatever. I'm saying a healthy Toronto Raptors team when you're seeing the depth of what they're able to throw out there and how they've looked so far this season. So clearly, as you said, you didn't get Kawhi Leonard for, back-to-backs in October or November. You didn't get Kawhi Leonard to have a great regular season because realistically, been there, done that. This is about trophies, championship aspirations, Eastern Conference title. This is about the playoffs. And so I'm okay with it too, Webby. I'm right there with you, man. I totally agree.
No question.
So the other thing too, we mentioned the Raptors sked. If we go backwards a little bit here, there's some interesting matchups, right? We saw the Raptors lose to the Bucks by, they got blown out in a game where there was no Kawhi and there was no Giannis in that game. Then we also saw the Raptors on the second night of that back-to-back with Kawhi in the lineup take down your Sixers. So two interesting games for the Raptors as you're looking at two teams also projected to be atop the Eastern Conference. I kind of want to get your take on not only those two games, Webby, but also how you're ranking the Sixers and Bucks as two squads.
Yikes. Well, one of the teams is an elite Eastern Conference contender with one of the best young players on the planet. Okay. In the NBA, and the other is the Philadelphia Sixers.
Ooh, okay.
And here's the thing, that game on the what was the Bucks game?
The Bucks game was Monday.
Sunday night?
Monday night.
Monday, and then the Sixers game was Tuesday. So the game on Monday night is I don't think that anybody who watched that game, if you're a Raptors fan and you were looking to advance scout the Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah. I don't think that game's going to do much for you because their number one player and literally one of the best players in the league didn't suit up. And didn't suit up for the Raptors either. So that's neither team at full capacity. I thought that the Sixers Raptors game really said a lot more about both teams. And that's why I'm a little worried about the Sixers. It's
interesting. And my biggest takeaway from the Bucks game, and you're right, there was no Kawhi, there was no Giannis, and of course for the Raptors as well, there was no Freddie, there was no OG. The Raptors were missing key
Fred
pieces,
and
right?
OG, yeah.
So the one thing, my biggest takeaway from the Bucks game was just that Mike Budenholzer has changed how that team plays.
Oh yeah,
right. And
it also goes to show you that Jason Kidd is a bad coach.
Yes,
Oh my God.
So what I got from the Bucks is that this is a different Bucks team in the sense that they have the same players. I mean, you add in a few little pieces here and there, but the style of play is way different, right? Like, that's a team that went from shooting, or I think it was attempting 24 threes last year to attempting 40 threes a game this year. Like, it's just night and day in terms of how that team plays, the style of play. It's up and down, fast tempoed, shooting threes, any chance they get. It's totally different. And, you know, it's more than Giannis. That's what I got from that too. And I know that obviously they'll play differently with Giannis on the floor, but I feel like those other guys are more empowered by the system that they're running. It's not just and you know what? There's similarities between the Raptors and Bucks too, right? Because it's not just one guy iso ball while everyone stands around and watches. There's action going on the backside, right? Do you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
There's player movement happening. There's back cuts. There's all these different things. And it just looked like a completely different team. That was cool. But to also co-sign what you said about the Sixers, Webby, in the middle of that game, I said, wow, it doesn't look like the Sixers are on the same level as the Raptors at all.
Bro, it was a little disconcerting, but you know the other thing about that game, it really goes to show you what today's NBA is all about, right?
Sure.
I mean, you can be down 24 points, but if you start to get hot from behind the arc, you can just like pull even with anybody.
Totally.
Now, my real beef with the Sixers right now is that like they're a good team if everything goes right.
Yeah.
If JJ comes out and hits threes, they're great. If Embiid stays out of foul trouble, he can be dominant. If Markelle Fultz pushes the ball up the court, he can be a successful player. But all these things have to, like, same with Robert Covington. He, like, personifies what I think the Sixers are right now, which is, like, if it starts to go right, it can be really good. But when it goes bad, like, you're not going to beat anybody.
Yeah.
And the problem is that right now, early on in the season, you're getting more and more these things not happening than they are happening.
This is interesting too, and I don't know when I wrote out kind of like things we're going to talk about, it dawned on me like we might end up stuck on this for a while because obviously you're a big Sixers fan, and this game against the Raptors to me was a really big deal just because I feel like coming into this season, all the talk was about, Celtics, Sixers, NBA or Eastern Conference Finals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People were kind of Raptors were in the talk too, but I feel
no. I think there were four. I think there were four coming into this season, and they were Celtics, Raptors, Sixers, and Bucks.
But I
That's
don't
kind
know
of what
if the talk was really on the Bucks and Raptors nearly as much as it was about the Sixers and Celtics. But even with that said, just watching the two teams play, there are a lot of things in that game that as a Sixers fan I kind of looked at. Not as a Sixers fan, but I mean, if I was a Sixers fan looking at that, it was kind of like, okay, well, Kawhi put the clamps on Ben Simmons. But Kawhi's going to do that to anybody, right? So that was kind of a weird one for Simmons, a lot of turnovers there. But I had questions for people who watch more Sixers games. Luckily, I'm talking to one right now. But like TJ McConnell, he barely played in that game. I thought that was weird. Also, they're trying to force feed Fultz into the starting lineup, and I don't know if that's the right move.
Okay, so the McConnell thing, I mean, of course, I think he should have played way more, especially when they kind of – it seemed like Fultz was DOA.
Yeah.
And they did keep trying to bring him back out there, and I thought that I agree with you that those minutes were like tailor-made for TJ to come in because that's kind of what he provides you, and I think that they're not using him enough to kind of spell Fultz rather than trying to bring him on in like garbage time or whatever. I don't know what he's done to the coaching staff, but Brett Brown used to love him last year, and now it's a lot of Mike Muscala.
Yeah,
you know?
It's just super weird how things have been for sure.
The Raptors game was a little funny, okay, because Embiid got in early foul trouble, and I think that really to say that when Embiid doesn't play, it hurts the Sixers. Like that's obvious, right? But it throws their whole offense and defense out of whack when he's not there on the court. But then the other thing that the Raptors did a really good job of is attacking the weaknesses of the Sixers, even with Embiid in there. Like you say, put the clamps on Simmons and make him try and shoot to beat you, you know? Like, they did a lot right against the Sixers, and it was just kind of disconcerting when you, like you say, like this is a team that came in as like a team that was had a really good chance of making it to the conference finals or the NBA finals. But
Yeah.
they've got some stuff to figure out. And you know what? I think they're one piece away. I think that they came into this season thinking that, this was a team that's good enough to get to the NBA finals. But they need one more piece. They needed to go after Paul George. They need Jimmy Butler.
Are you in on the Jimmy move? Like, would you give up either, let's say, Fultz or Saric to get
I'd give
Jimmy
up.
Butler?
I'd give up Saric for
Yo, what
sure for
happened to
Jimmy
Saric?
Butler.
He looks like a different guy so far.
He's fallen off a cliff, man. He's brutal.
Super weird. Not looking good so far for the Sixers. And
Looking
by not
good,
looking
though.
Good, I mean,
Hold on. Looking good.
What I was gonna say is, as an East power so far, right? Like,
Okay.
if you're looking at the other teams in the East that they're supposed to be in the same tier as, it doesn't look that way so far. Mind you, it's really early. Obviously, we haven't even played 10 games in the season. But when you do a weekly podcast, these are the kind of things you talk about, right?
True. And tonight looking a lot better at home against the Clippers. Like, when Embiid plays a full game, he's got 40 points and 16 rebounds. He's one of 5 guys in the league averaging 25 and 10. And so when he plays a full game, I mean, it's a different story for the Sixers, right?
I wonder that too. And the one last thing I want to ask you about that, because we kind of talked about it on our post-game Raptors show, which, yes, that was a shameless plug. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I asked a question, right? In this NBA, where you have every single team basically running up and down and shooting threes, right? And trading threes for twos, or at least attempting to do that. Can your team win the championship or have like serious championship aspirations if your best player is a traditional big guy?
Yes, but
Okay.
you've got to have enough pieces around you
You got to play your
to
shooters.
to complement that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that Joel Embiid is a traditional big man.
He can step out. He can step out and knock down the Jimmy, and obviously he's a lot more athletic than your 90s big guys. But you know what I mean? Like, you're still dumping it down to him in the post and running your offense that way.
Yeah, but isn't that what Kawhi Leonard can play? You can dump down into the post. You can do the same with LeBron James, right?
Yeah, but that's not really how those teams
I
play.
understand he's not
You know what I'm saying? Like, everyone's
yeah.
running up and down. I think like the lowest points per game is like 100. Like, it's just everyone's running up and down and scoring, and it's all fast paced, and it's not really slow down half court offense, dump it into your big guy and go.
But I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily the Sixers' offense. It is part of it, and especially if you want to get Embiid going. But there's a lot of three-point shooting or attempted three-point shooting here on the Sixers.
Okay, I got you. They just need to get those guys back in the lineup, as
Yeah.
even JoJo said that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He said something to that effect, like they need their shooters on the court. But
you know what? Fultz is like a plus 24 tonight. He played great.
Markel. Okay.
He took it right at Boban, actually. The third quarter running out, he just took it right at the big guy.
That is amazing. But yeah, we talked about it being the early season and lots to talk about, of course, because teams get off to red hot starts, but there are other teams that kind of fall back. And here's one hot take for you. DeMar DeRozan will get MVP votes this season. Now, Mr. Webster, I bring this up because so far, your man's is going for 28, 7, and 6. Spurs are 5 and 2. Are you buying that DeMar DeRozan will get MVP votes this season?
I mean, his numbers across the board are career highs. He's averaging like 2 more assists per game than he ever did, and he's averaging like 2 more rebounds a game than he ever did.
It's crazy. I think this is one of those classic cases of it's super early. And I know they've beaten some teams, and I know that DeMar stepped up a lot, and he's done an amazing job in terms of handling the bulk of the playmaking for a team that's missing their point guard. But it's super early, and I'm not buying into the Spurs even being a solid playoff team in the Western Conference. Now, I'm not saying they're missing the playoffs for sure, but I think it'll be a battle for the Spurs to make the playoffs. I just don't think that a team that is built around, like, hey, if Greg Popovich is able to get a top 4 seed in the West with DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Rudy Gay, hey, Pop is the real life GOAT, and he might already be that. You know what I'm
Isn't he
saying? But
already?
This might be one of his like greatest coaching talents or
Oh.
moments ever. Because listen, right now it's great, and we've seen DeMar DeRozan have hot starts like that before. We've seen this happen before. I just don't know if it's sustainable if you're San Antonio, and I think there's a lot of good teams out west that they're going to be battling for a playoff spot. I don't think it's that locked and loaded that the Spurs are a definite playoff team.
I think it is. And honestly, look at their team last year, and they made it into the playoffs. I think they are a. You can write it in black Sharpie. How about that? That they'll make the playoffs, man. That's a team definitely that I believe in. And again, like we talked about this when the trade happened for DeRozan and I always like to call him Kyle, but it's Kawhi. With that trade, we said that DeRozan's going to a perfect fit for him on that team.
For sure.
And honestly, when the point guard went down, when Dejounte Murray went down, this is a great position for DeMar to be in as kind of the shooting point guard for this team.
It is a thing where they look great so far. I just don't think it's sustainable. And again, like DeMar DeRozan is a great player, but I think DeMar DeRozan is going to sum up what's going to be the problem with this Spurs team. And the problem is their defense isn't good, right? They don't have good defense. And the fact that they don't shoot threes well. They're okay, but in a league where, again, everybody's running up and down and shooting threes, I don't think this hot start for the Spurs so far, they're going to maintain it.
Man,
we'll have to revisit it.
We will revisit this because I'm writing them in black Sharpie ink to get into the playoffs for sure, no question about it.
Fair enough.
And honestly, like, the number jump just being in this new system for DeRozan is really impressive.
For sure. No, he's off to a great start. More power, more life to DeMar DeRozan, who, clearly, much like Kyle, has used the off-season stuff as motivation in the early going of this season. And, yeah, I think the Spurs, though, things will settle down, and people will remember that it's Rudy Gay and LaMarcus Aldridge, and, yeah, they'll come back down to reality. But, hey, I could be wrong. Another team talking about coming back down to reality. After a 6-0, I was about to say 6-0. They're definitely not 6-0. After an 0-6 start, the Cleveland Cavaliers decided that they were going to part ways with Tyronn Lue.
Oof.
After an 0-6 start, my hot take for you, Webby, is the Cavs are an embarrassing organization. Turn up or turn down?
Well, like... the whole organization, I'm going to turn down because they've won an NBA championship.
Okay.
There are franchises out there that have not won NBA championships. I do not think I can rate a franchise that does not have a chip above the Cleveland Cavaliers. Although it's bad when J.R. Smith is asking for a trade away.
Mr. Supreme himself.
When nobody wants to coach the team. Shit. Call me up. I'll coach the Cavs. I'll even take some soup being thrown at me every once in a while. Everybody thinks they're too good to coach the Cavs. It's like
it's an NBA coaching job.
Yeah, exactly, bro. What's Patino doing? I mean,
Patino's probably would take a basketball job coaching anyway.
He said he wanted to coach in the NBA again.
It's super interesting, though, and the reason I'm going to turn up on this and say the Cavs are definitely an embarrassing organization because the reality of the situation of that franchise is the only reason that it's ever had a sniff of success is because LeBron was born near their team. That's it. If LeBron's not born near their team, that is a garbage dumpster fire of an organization, and they're basically that anyways. Like, LeBron's first stint, they weren't able to put enough around him. He leaves. They go back to being that bad that they were able to get, 3 number 1 picks? Or enough number 1 picks to where it added enough value to get LeBron to come back.
Right.
But then he leaves again. And so you're now going to fire Tyronn Lue, who brought you to how many consecutive Eastern Conference Finals, but also you mentioned the NBA championship that they won. He was the coach of the Eastern
Right.
championship that they won, and you're just going to fire him after an 0-6 start? Like, what did you expect? You had LeBron James, and now you don't.
No, you don't
that
even-
might take a while to figure things out.
You don't even
right?
have Kevin Love.
Also true. And there were reports, what's his name? Joe Varden of The Athletic said that he reported that a lot of players were upset about the firing of Tyronn Lue. I mean, and obviously Tyronn Lue's a player's coach, right? So he's well-liked in the locker room. But there seemed to be dissension because Lue wanted to play more of the veteran guys, but the front office was more behind playing the younger guys, which, you know, that seems like something you'd be able to work out and sort out, but I also don't think it's something that matters because I think you were going to take L's regardless.
Right.
So, like, what were your expectations if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers? Then on top of that, you can't even handle, you know, sorting out your interim coaching situation. Like, this franchise is a complete and utter joke. Complete joke, Cleveland Cavaliers.
I would say that, yeah, I agree with you. This year could be a wash, but again, it's like it's like that Andy Samberg Lonely Island song. Yeah, but I still had sex, right? It's like, yeah, we suck now, and J.R. Smith is demanding your trade, but you know what? We still won a championship.
That's fair. I bet you everyone in Cleveland would not trade that.
Yeah,
Like,
call them
of course,
embarrassing.
The memories of that,
Call
whatever. Right?
them embarrassing all you like. They still won a championship.
You're right. You're right at the end of the day, Webby. I don't have any answer for that at all. Dan Gilbert, I guess, you know, at the end of the day, Dan Gilbert is a winner.
Which,
Jeez. Yeah, that's the thing. Moving on to our next turn up, turn down topic. The Lakers have started the season 3-5. 3-5. And that's only because their third win came as they barely beat the Dallas Mavericks on the last second free throw by LeBron James.
hold on. How about my doughy boy?
He's putting in work.
Yo, he's
I'll give him
nice,
credit for
though.
that. He's putting in work. He's nice. I will admit I was wrong. You, Mr. Andrew Webster, were correct in our discussion about would he have a good season or not. And so far, so good. I was wrong.
I thought you were going to say the conversation that we had, is he doughy or is he just a white guy?
Well,
I'm still not sure.
I'm sticking with Doughy.
I'm sticking with Doughy. Yo, Doughy can play, though. Doughy can play. Pillsbury dope boy.
He can. He can ball so far.
So, yeah.
We know that Lakers players can ball. We just don't know if they can ball together yet, as they're off to a very slow start. But the next hot take is in our turn up, turn down segment. Again, turn up equals good, turn down equals bad. The hot take is the Lakers will not make the playoffs this season. Webby, what say you? Turn up or turn down?
It's so tough to bet against LeBron James.
Okay.
I'm going to turn down on that. I think it's going to be more likely that they make the playoffs than if the Houston Rockets make the playoffs.
Whoa. Wow. We will get to the Houston Rockets in a second, but in terms of this, the Lakers will not make the playoffs? I'm also going to turn down on that for the exact reason that you said. I will not bet against LeBron James. And one of the main other than him still being the best player on the planet, one of the reasons why I will not bet against LeBron is because we've seen early season LeBron before. We've seen LeBron joining a new team.
Yeah, we've seen new
how
team
that goes.
LeBron.
We've seen that struggle before, right? When he first left Cleveland and went to Miami, it took them a while to get it going. They didn't get off to a good start. When he left Miami and went back to Cleveland, they didn't get off to a good start. So him now leaving Cleveland and going to the Lakers, guess what? They didn't get off to a good start. But you know what happened in all of those years anyways? They made it to the NBA Finals. Now, are they going to make the NBA Finals this year? Probably not. But you know what? They'll definitely make the playoffs. Why? Because they have LeBron James. It's just that simple. And I know sometimes, you know, we got to go to stats or we got to go to, like, find some, like, crazy rhyme or reasoning for these things. But I will always bet on LeBron James. He's feeling out his teammates. He's I know it sounds dumb, and we talked about this a lot while watching the Cavaliers struggle through last season, We talked a lot about, is LeBron trying or is he not trying?
Right.
It sounds ridiculous, but he's not trying. He's feeling his way through games still, right? He's not, and by trying we mean, is he going ham, right?
It's funny you bring that up. He is still definitely. I don't even necessarily know if he's like feeling out his own players, let alone feeling out the system. What can he do? What can he do with what they've got going on? And yeah, the roster around him. Like, and then I think you're right. As these weeks go by, we're going to see him start to ramp it up, and then you're really going to see who can play with him, who wants to play with him, and who doesn't, and who can't. And then we'll really understand this team. Now, yeah, I just can't bet against LeBron making the playoffs.
You can't bet against LeBron to make the playoffs. Of course he's going to make the playoffs. I remember LeBron a couple years ago, and mind you, he's older, right? So I think chilling LeBron as an older LeBron looks a lot slower, looks a lot less engaged, if that's the right term. You know what I mean? But I still think that he can turn it on. And also, I think they have a good roster. They just got to figure out, everyone's got to figure out, where they sit in the totem pole. You know what I mean? Like, who gets the ball in certain situations.
Right.
Is it Ingram or is it Kuzma that can be the main scorer when LeBron's not on the floor? Which one of them is the second scorer when LeBron is on the floor? Like, all of these things take time to figure out. And one of the bright signs early to me was, after the whole fight stuff and the suspensions and all that, you saw games from Kyle Kuzma. Like, what stood out to me the most was Kyle Kuzma wasn't like your typical guy playing alongside LeBron. And what I mean by that is you see people be super passive when they're on the floor with LeBron, right? Like, they're standing around watching him or waiting for him to make plays or seeing what he's going to do. Kuzma wasn't about that life at all. Kuzma was like, I'm on a 2-on-1 with LeBron. Well, he's like, I'm on a 2-on-1 with LeBron. I'm not passing it to LeBron. I'm dunking it, right? And I think, like, that's what you want to see. You want to see guys with confidence alongside LeBron because he's at this point of his career. He can't carry the team for 82 games and then for a full playoff run. They're going to need these young bucks to step up if they want to win a round in the playoffs. And so I think it's kind of cool to see that early. Again, Kuzma I think is really good, better than people give him credit for, even though I know he gets talked about a lot, but I still think he's better than most people think. And Ingram I think is going to be okay. And if things really start to hit the fan, they're going to make a trade, right? So
I think Ingram's nice.
I think he's nice too.
I think that was a big rebound game that he had after the suspension. He came out and he scored like 24 or 26 points.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's got some real talent, and I think that's a good kind of scorer to pair with a LeBron. Same with Kuzma. I think those two with LeBron is pretty good, and then we'll just see when they bring in Anthony Davis and Damian Lillard.
Right? Yeah, I just think, too, you got a lot of characters on that team that you got to get used to playing with, right? Namely Lance. The Lance experience is amazing.
Lance
if you're not watching Lakers games.
Lance was fantastic the other night.
Yo, my guy on a 2-on-1 tried to throw LeBron a behind-the-back alley-oop pass. Like, not he went around his back, had the ball in front, and tried to throw the alley-oop. No, he tried to throw an alley-oop pass behind his back, like in the air behind his back to LeBron. Obviously, it went like way in the wrong direction. And then Lance turns and he's like, my bad. Like, really? It
was a beautiful thing.
No, but whose bad is it? Like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's so amazing. Lance Stevenson, if you love basketball, if you love fun things, you got to just watch the Lakers and Lance Stevenson. The other thing was, like, you watch the bench during that play, and I know we're on an audio medium here, and I'm talking about a lot of visual things, but you know what? It's 2018, so you can be listening to something while looking something up on your phone. And with the magic of Twitter, you can just type in Lance Stevenson bad pass, and it'll pop up. While you're still
you'll probably get a mixtape of bad Lance passes.
Right? It's called technology, right? 2018. But when you do watch back that play, I urge you to just pay attention to the bench, because as Lance has it and he tries to throw the pass, you see JaVale McGee jump up on the bench, and then you see JaVale McGee jumps up in anticipation as if this pass is going to actually work. And then you see right beside him, it's Luke Walton standing up, just being so angry because he's like, what are you doing? The Lakers are the best. Lakers. What did we call last year? We called the Cavs Keeping Up with the Cavs, the best reality show in the league.
Keeping Up with the Cavs. Who's going to throw soup?
Right? We're not keeping up with the Cavs this year, that's for sure. But the Lakers, I don't know. We'll come up with something for what Lance will make them dance. Even LeBron calling them make them dance Lance.
Make him dance Lance, man.
So good. So good. Lakers basketball, they will be in the playoffs. Continue to watch Lakers games because they're a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Another
good
team
times.
that is having a lot of fun. The Golden State Warriors, Webby.
Yeah.
And, I did a big sigh there because I know it's a hot button issue on this podcast between you and I, the Golden State Warriors.
We're haters.
But here's the hot take. The Warriors are bad for the NBA. Turn up or turn down. The reason why this is a hot take is because there's some people that see what Golden State is doing and just running everybody off the floor, having these like record-setting games as just another example of, well, it's just unfair. Their team is too good. But what say you, Webby? Are the Warriors bad for the NBA?
I don't think the Warriors are bad for the NBA. I think we don't like them because they make the playoffs boring and the ultimate, NBA finals boring. But I'll tell you why they're not boring is because every night, as stacked as they are, they can have nights like Clay's or like Steph Curry's night the other night when he dropped 50. Like, say what you will about what you think about Steve Kerr as a coach or Steph Curry as a entertaining NBA superstar, but these guys are on, and when they're on, it's must-see TV. When I heard Clay was going off, I flipped right over,
Like, isn't that the best? Like, we talk about NBA Twitter all the time on this podcast, obviously.
They're made
Isn't that
for
the
it.
best when something starts happening on Twitter and you just see, like, 5 tweets in a row that's like, Clay,
Yeah.
that's it. And you're like, oh, where's the remote? And you're flipping over right there. As much of a Golden State hater as I am, if you listen to this podcast and I have a rule where I do not watch the Golden State Warriors in the regular season. And I watch them in the playoffs because it's the playoffs. But I will say they are not bad for the NBA. Because as much as I hate on the Warriors, I still have a vested interest in the Warriors because there's storylines all the time. And, I want to root against them. So whether I like them or dislike them, I feel something about them, right? Like, It's not the Brooklyn Nets. They're not.
Hold on.
Like Nets, right?
That was listen. Did you see the Brooklyn Nets game the other night?
No, I did not see
Spencer Dinwiddie.
Oh, I did see that. Was that the one against the Knicks?
The Knicks,
game?
and then did you see what he said afterwards?
No.
So he goes off in the fourth quarter, like late in the fourth quarter, hitting nasty 3-pointers plus the foul. He hits a step back over Andre Drummond in overtime to ice the game. They asked him, like, after the game, they were like, Spencer, you hit that, tell us about that shot over Andre Drummond. And he goes, I had Hoodie Kermit in my head. And a Hoodie Kermit told me, hit that step back 3 over Andre Drummond. And so he's like, you know what I did? I listened to Hoodie Kermit. I was like, yo, Spencer Dinwiddie's this shit. What a stud.
That is incredible.
But that's
incredible.
That's my thing about the NBA too, though. It's like every night. Look at Derrick Rose the other night.
Exactly.
It's every night there's something going on. Right now I'm watching the Boston Celtics have hit like 22 3-pointers against the Bucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's every night there's some huge thing that's happening, whether it's funny on social media or a new record getting broken or just like some crazy dunk or something hilarious that happened. It's great. It's every night.
You're totally right. And you know what? The Warriors, my biggest beef in prior years with the Warriors was that the regular season didn't matter, or it didn't seem like the regular season mattered to them, and it was apparent, right? Like, it was apparent they just weren't trying. This year so far, I think they're off to, 7-1 start?
Right.
8-1 start, something like that. They're off to a great start this year. But the way that they're winning, and especially the week that they're coming off of, I mean, it's one of those things where, Warriors are 8-1 to start the season, right? But the way that they're doing it so far, just look at the week that they had. Last Wednesday, Steph has 51. Durant scores 41 in New York on Friday, and then Klay Thompson follows that up with 52. It's like these guys are having like internal games within the games, right? Where it's just like, all right, who are we going to get off tonight? Okay, Klay, your turn. You go, right? And then the next game, it's like, oh, Durant's in New York. You know what? let's troll all these New York Knicks fans as if Durant's actually going to come to town, and let's have Durant go off. And it's just hilarious to me to watch these guys play this game, and it's a better way of them to make a mockery of the regular season than they were last year by just not trying.
Right.
But to me, it's also just apparent that, like, this isn't fair because they can just do whatever they want. Did you notice in that Klay Thompson game where he was bombing mad threes that Alfonso McKinney, yes, the same guy who was on the Raptors D-League team last year, went for like 19 and 10? And you know that he happened to be playing in Chicago, his hometown, right? So obviously, like, how easy is it to assume that these guys are like, oh, the kid's playing in his hometown, let's make sure he has a nice night. And they're just feeding him because they can do that shit, because they can put up 92 points
and a half.
Like, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. But the real reason why, like, they're not bad for the NBA. But you know how they can be better for the NBA? If they just went full-on heel and embrace this. And what I mean by that is Klay had 52 points and didn't play in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Steph, when he had his 51, he didn't play in the fourth quarter. Why not? Steve Kerr, like, just go full heel. Stop pretending as if you're not in on this whole troll of the fact that we're just better than everyone and we know that we're better than everyone, and let these guys go for something historic. If you're putting up 52 in 3 quarters, let Klay go for 75. Why not? Why not? What's the point in pulling?
Listen, nobody wants to play the villain in the NBA. Nobody wants to, other than maybe Patrick Beverley.
Yes, that is a very good point right there. That is a very good point. But your boy Steve Kerr, the one last thing on the Warriors,
more Steve Kerr slander.
This is why
every week Steve Kerr. I don't even like him, but now I feel like that I have to stick up for him just because nobody will.
You do, so that we don't just sound ridiculous.
Yeah. Just like Steve Kerr, 3 titles in 4 years. What a bum.
Right. No, but it's things like this, okay? This guy's in the post game after Klay's game where he goes for whatever the record was, 14 threes, right? And Steve Kerr's like, oh, I didn't even really realize what was happening with the record. Someone brought it up in one of the huddles. That he, like, tied the record. And I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. Then I thought, like, oh, who has the record? I'm like, oh, Steph, do you have the record? And I turned to Steph and I'm like, get out of here, Steve Kerr. Like, how are you pretending that you don't know that Steph Curry has the top 2 spots on, like, most threes made in a game? You were there, right? Like, you're on the sidelines watching it. Like, what are we talking about right now? I just hate the nonchalant, like, I want them to lean into the fact that they rigged the game so that they would have the best team, and I want them to steamroll everybody and just score 200 points in a game and let Klay or Steph go for 100. Just do it.
Agreed.
That's what I want them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We all hate them enough already. It's not like they could do any more to make us hate them anymore.
Also, too, I know, and you're right, too, about there's no villains in the NBA because, like, I don't think that Steph Curry or Klay is doing that on Patrick Beverley.
No.
Right? Like, Patrick Beverley is throwing an elbow at someone, like, right? You know what I mean? Like, that NBA is kind of gone where, like, people are just letting you. Like, Klay Thompson was shooting open threes, which doesn't really make sense to me when you're watching the highlights. But do you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be a hard foul at some point, and that doesn't happen in the NBA anymore. But anyways, you mentioned, Webby, NBA Twitter, right? Which leads us to our Feed Me segment, which is obviously just the best and worst things that come across our social media feeds from the wonderful league that is the NBA. And leading off our Feed Me segment is Derrick Rose, because he took over NBA Twitter on Wednesday night as Derrick Rose scored 50. Like, how did you catch any of the game, Webby? Like, what was did you catch it on Twitter? Like, were you part of the Twitter storm?
Scored 50, had the game-winning block, and then as your colleague Sid Sixero would say, then he ate the bowl. I was kind of following along on Twitter, saw some of the moves, and then, like, I saw that he had 35 after 3, and I was super tired, and I'm washed. So I went to bed, and then I woke up, and I got into work, and my buddy was like, yo, did you see D. Rose go off for 50? I was like, wait, he scored 50 points? What's crazy to me is that's his career high.
Yeah, and his career high, I think it was like his first 40-point game since
2011
or something
absolutely.
like that, right? And it's just
now,
it's such a crazy story.
Yeah,
no, go on.
I was going to say, when I heard that, I was like, man, good for Derrick Rose, and then I was like, I don't know if he's a guy, like, I'm kind of two minds about this, right? Like,
and do you know what? I'm glad you said it that way, because I'll let you go first, and then I'll say what. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Continue.
But, like, obviously, like, everybody, I mean, we watch sports for these second chance stories. We love to see guys come back. We love to see people who go through personal turmoil be able to turn their lives around and get back on the court, do the thing that they love, and do it as well as we've known them to do it. But the Derrick Rose situation has a lot of layers to it, has a lot of levels to it, right? Where there's some things in there that really, maybe he shouldn't be where he is if the but then you're getting into it's a whole can of worms, right?
It's a whole different can of worms, right? And here's my thing, right, that I'll say. Yes, okay, so as this was going on Twitter, and what happens in 2018 is something happens to someone on Twitter, that person becomes trending, and then there's the quick race to be like, to say something negative about that person.
Here's why
right?
we shouldn't be happy about this.
Exactly. And so that's about anybody, right? So I'm not just saying that about Derrick Rose and Derrick Rose only. I just think that's what happens in 2018. And my biggest problem with that is two things. I say this all the time on this podcast, but more than one thing is allowed to exist in the same space.
You're absolutely right.
And now Derrick Rose, he was acquitted in the civil trial, right? It was a civil case. And I don't even really want to like dive too deep into that, but I'll say this. Two things are allowed to exist at the same time. Derrick Rose is allowed, or anyone is allowed to be bad in one sense, but in another instance, they did something on the court that was really, really good. Like, no person is just one thing.
But
two things are allowed to exist in the same space. So you could think that Derrick Rose is a piece of shit, but you could also appreciate the fact that here's a guy that got injured and was one of he was the youngest MVP ever in the league, and then he had his career just like ripped apart by injuries year after year after year after year, and then on the court comes back and scores 50 points. You're allowed to look at that and be like, you know what? On the court, that's a crazy thing. But off the court, that's a pretty fucked up situation. You're allowed to think both of those things. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I feel like what always happens in 2018 with this Twitter culture, and especially with the media taking their cues from Twitter culture, which makes no sense to me because it's only, 280 characters?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like someone tweets something about Derrick Rose. It's like, yeah, but you forgot to mention this about the rape case. And it's like, bro, I got 280 characters. Like, I'm not writing a novel on his whole entire career. Like, I understand those two things are there, but right now I'm watching a basketball game. I don't know. That's my that was my beef with the whole narrative today about, well, make sure you mention this or make sure you mention that. It's like, yes, I understand these two things are going on, and both of those things are allowed to exist in the same world. I'm not saying that he's a good person. I'm not saying that he's a horrible person. There's a legal process that happened. There's a legal process that's going to continue that will decide the fate of, what he did or didn't do, right? Like, I'm not a judge, right? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, we're not here to judge people's moralities all the time, right? And I think we get caught up in the hot take culture of, like, everything has to be 100% terrible or everything has to be 100% great. And it's like, that's not life. That's not real life.
Exactly. And I don't know if compartmentalization is something that is looked down upon in the culture that we live in, of outrage culture. Like, are we allowed to say, like, or do the alleged crimes override? It's so weird. And
you know what the problem is? I think, like, everybody feels like, we all have a Twitter account, we all have Instagram, hey, we have a podcast, right? Like, everybody now has a platform, and I think with that platform, people feel as if they have to be right about everything, right? Like, people aren't able to say, right? Like, I feel very confident in having this conversation right now, Webby, and saying, listen, I don't know everything about the rape allegations or the rape case, I'm okay with saying that and saying that I don't know everything about it, and so I can't fully judge and say like, hey, he's a horrible human being, and so I should root against him for the rest of his NBA career, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't think that people are able to, as you said, compartmentalize and say like, hey, well, these two things are going on. I don't really know enough about that. That is a really bad allegation, and it's a really fucked up situation. But he also did this.
Well, I don't even know if we're allowed to compartmentalize. I don't know if that's allowed to happen.
It's interesting.
Right?
It's interesting.
The other thing is, too, it's like everybody wants to be the first on Twitter to either point somebody else out or pat themselves on the back for their...
True.
Because everybody comes
for their take.
Everybody comes for everybody on Twitter. And if you have something in there that's like, hey, you know what? Like, I still really like Kanye despite the MAGA stuff. So that could come back and bite you at some point. You know,
yes,
Twitter,
that's a great example,
Twitter never lies, right? Like, so everybody has these platforms, but these platforms are used a lot of times to cover people's asses, right? And it may not be necessarily what they think. And I think that the only thing that is good about this new age that we're living in is that at least it is opening up a dialogue for some.
I'd love to hear people's opinions on this, even if you adamantly disagree.
No,
that's allowed,
please do.
Again,
if you do disagree, even more than I want to hear from you and like talk about this and hear different sides of this story and different, sides of the coin.
One thing too, I want to hear like if our female listeners, I'd love to get like your opinion on this, just because like I feel like as a dude we come from, like our own experiences and our own,
and especially sports culture too, right?
Exactly, right? And so I'd love to hear different people's opinions, because someone might say something in the comments that really makes me think and be like, oh, you know what? That's true. Like, I'm definitely open to the debate and the conversation, the actual conversation, meaning I'm not hell-bent in this point where here's a line in the sand and everything is bad about this guy or everything is good about this guy, because that's not real world. That's not the real world. That's not real life. So, yeah, let us know what you think, people. Hit us up. And, remember that social media is just that. It's social media. There's only 280 characters. You're only going to be able to say so much in it. And something as complex as the career of Derrick Rose probably shouldn't be left to arguments in 280 characters.
Say what you will about Derrick Rose, but that is a career that definitely deserves more than 280 characters.
Definitely agree. Let's switch it up a little and maybe
lighten up the mood. Lighten the mood
as we talk about the Feed Me category. And I guess we'll sort of transition into Ask on Blast, because that also ties into social media, and Halloween just occurred, right? Halloween was, I guess by the time people hear this, 2 nights prior. Probably still eating a bunch of chocolates.
Oh, Skittles. Sour
candy.
Skittles. Sour Skittles are the truth, my friend.
Amazing. But the question here in Ask on Blast comes from Chris, and Chris wants to know who won Halloween. And, the sports world goes crazy, right?
Yo, NBA has been really awesome for Halloween very recently. And I think it's TNT's fault. I think we have TNT to blame for how great the guys are getting at Halloween costumes, because really the Thursday night games were really some of the first times that you saw the guys come into the arena,
yes.
And now that they're so, listen, LeBron with the fashion and Russ with the fashion is ridiculous nowadays. So these guys see it as a platform that they can go out and have these amazing Halloween costumes. I love it. But I'll tell you,
did athletes really show up to the game in costumes before this year? I don't remember that being a thing last year or years prior. Am I just forgetting that?
If it happened, it was one dude, right? The one that I remember was Sheldon Brown for the Eagles came out in the Jason mask. But the weirdest thing about that was I think that wasn't even a Halloween game. I think it was just a random game that Sheldon Brown came out in the Jason mask. But I'll tell you who won Halloween, but I don't even know if you'll count it. It might be a little it happened about a week and a half ago, but it was Damian Lillard coming in as Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I thought that was amazing too, right? I thought
he had the whole get-up and the mask. It was awesome.
It was great. It was great, and he had the belt, he had everything. He had the shirt. I'm pretty
He had
sure
the
Stone
strut.
Cold even retweeted him, too.
Yo, he had the Stone Cold strut going on, too.
Right? It was so good. I thought that was really cool. LeBron, I guess, put a little effort into it. But the thing that ruined LeBron's for me was the fact that he had the Supreme hammer.
I didn't see that.
You didn't see that with his costume? The hammer that he had was a Supreme hammer.
That's amazing.
It's like, come on, man. Like, that's, like, I get it. On one hand, I'm like, I get it. But on the other hand, I'm like, come on, man. Like, really? Nobody needs a Supreme hammer. You know what I'm saying? No? I just thought that was
that's
ridiculous.
amazing. I just looked that up. That's awesome.
Other costumes I wanted to point out. Shouts to Canada's tennis queen, Jeannie Bouchard. Her and her friend dressed up as Lil Pump and Kanye from that video. And again, this is a segment where we're talking about visual things on an audio platform. But as I said, get your Googles up. It's 2018. Get familiar with some technology and figure it out. But did you catch that one? Did you see that one, Webby?
Sorry, which one was that?
It was Jeannie Bouchard and one of her friends dressed up as Kanye and Lil
Oh,
Pump
with the
from that
square.
video.
Yeah. I did see that.
That was kind of funny.
The one I
also
saw was
enjoy-
Eric Andre, and he was one of those rappers, but I forget what the guy's...
Oh, was it Tekashi?
No, it was Triple Red.
Oh,
And he
they're all the same.
looked just like Triple Red. It was wild.
Or Trippy Red or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
Trippy Red, my bad.
I enjoyed Jay-Z and Beyonce. I don't know if you saw their costumes, but
No.
Beyonce was 1980s legend Florence Griffith Joyner.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember FloJo.
of course.
And Jay-Z was Tommy Smith from 1968 Mexico, and he's doing the pose.
I did see
fists
it.
in the air.
I did see it.
Obviously, we know Jay said no to the Super Bowl. You need me, I don't need you. Yeah,
That's
I was
it.
just dropping some bars there. But, yeah, I thought that was kind of cool, a little sports twist there with the
With
king
both,
and
with
queen of the
FloJo and,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, totally cool.
Did we say Clay?
Klay Thompson, I thought was really fun.
Jackie
Klay
Moon,
Thompson,
yeah, Love Me Sexy was really good.
That's pretty good. The win, though, might go to Juju Smith-Schuster.
Oh, I didn't see his.
Dressed up in just his Steelers uniform.
That's
Was on the street, handing out candy to people.
awesome.
In intersections.
He's like
That
20.
was actually funny.
He's like 21 years old. I don't even know if he's old enough to drink in the States right now.
He, I will say, appears to be living his best life.
Yo, 100%.
He just seems to be everywhere. Like, his Instagram feed, he's everywhere just having a good time, watching whatever other games when he's not playing football. Like, he's in these streets having fun.
Not mad at him. Not mad at him.
We like athletes that have fun, right?
Now-
But
now-
I also want to ask.
Oh, I was going to
I wanna
ask
you about Halloween.
I was going to ask you what you went to for Halloween as.
I didn't wear a costume, and I went to a party on Saturday, but it was just my friend's birthday at a bar. Like, it wasn't like a Halloween. It wasn't per se a Halloween thing. Like, there were people there wearing costumes, but it wasn't like everybody was dressed up in a costume. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't like a serious, like, this is a Halloween party. So I didn't dress up for Halloween, but I will say I do enjoy the Halloween party thing. Like, I do like dressing up. I like trying to come up with a funny costume or whatever. I like seeing other people's costumes that they put thought into. That's not just like, I'm a pirate or I'm a sexy pirate, or although I'm not complaining about the sexy pirate.
No, sexy pirates
but you
out
know what
here.
I'm trying to say.
For
You know
sure.
what I'm saying.
For sure. Now,
What'd you get up to?
So the funniest thing about Halloween for me is that, I mean, I used to work for The Score. I used to work for Sportsnet. And as you know, Shelley, when you're doing the highlights, the hours are just brutal. So
Yes.
I have friends who throw a great Halloween party every year. It's like a yearly tradition. And my whole thing was that I would always show up around 2:30, 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
dressed just regular, and I would come as a highlight, like a BA or a voicing
Yeah.
reporter. And I always love Halloween because honestly, like, it's my favorite like party day more than New Year's Eve, more than St. Patty's Day, even more than like May 2-4 weekend or Canada Day. I love getting after it on Halloween. And
For sure.
I never really, so because I was working so late and my girlfriend, now wife, was in the serving industry, right? So she would always get off late. So this year, we actually had the weekend off. We went out to Toronto. We went to my friend's Halloween party. Shout out to Alex and Emily. And we did the couple's costume, but we're so washed that it's like a reference from the 90s. We were Wayne and Garth.
That's a solid costume. Nothing wrong with
that. Not bad. Been done. However, there were some good costumes at this party. Was that maybe not the best costumes, but this girl showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2:30 in the morning, dressed as Kraft Dinner, and was fucking drunk as shit. She came in ready to light the party on fire. I was impressed. I was very impressed. We had
shout out to Halloween, man. I love Halloween and dressing up and dress up parties and all that. I just was out of it this year, and probably the only reason I was even out was just because it was my buddy's birthday. But yeah,
but you know what?
During a normal,
still a primo party weekend. Whenever that Halloween weekend is, it's always great because it's not hot. It's like jacket weather. You got slutty pirates walking around. It's amazing.
And people are out to have a good time, too, right? Like, you go to a good Halloween party, it's a good time. And young bucks in your, late teens, 20s, go out and have a good time and enjoy Halloween. Halloween is definitely one of the best, party weekends. And also, always think about – I'm going to give you young bucks some tips here. Always think about what your costume is, right? Because remember, at the end of the day, as Webby said, I mean, you're going out – it's Halloween. A lot of people are out to have a good time. You don't want to be anything too crazy that might stop the progress of your night, let's say.
Or having to carry it home the next day.
Yes, carried a big, huge box somewhere, or you can't get in a cab or something.
Yeah, because your R2-D2 costume is too bulky.
So good, so good. Webby, though, that was... also so good was this podcast. I thought that was a lot of fun. Had a good time.
A spooky episode of the Ball on Blast podcast.
Hey, man, we hit you with some basketball talk. We hit you with some serious talk.
Ooh,
we hit you with some Halloween talk. An eclectic mix this week, Webby. But if people want to get an eclectic mix of your tweets or your takes, where can they find you, Mr. Andrew Webster?
The positive Fultz energy is coming from @awebster84 on Twitter, and a lot of pictures of food on my Instagram. That's also @awebster84 because, as you mentioned, we are washed, Shelly. So there's a lot of food on the Instagram.
Amazing, amazing. And my name is Sheldon Alexander. You can find me on Twitter @ShellAlexander, on Instagram @Sheldon Alexander, and those are the same places where you can find all the info that's going on in the On Blast world, including this podcast, the Ball on Blast podcast.
Post-game podcast?
Yes, that is a thing too. And, you can find this podcast, which me, myself, and Andrew Webster. Did I just say that? I really just said that.
Yeah,
me, myself, and Andrew Webster. That's what I just said. Maybe I'm doing this podcast. There's someone else beside me that you just can't. No, I'm joking. But you can find the Ball on Blast podcast. Shout out to the people on SoundCloud and on iTunes and Google Play. And shout out to the people on the YouTube page who have been checking it out, liking and commenting and, really enjoying the new project we got out, which is the Wrap It Up Raps post-game show. Raptors fans, tune in after each and every Raptor game. You can find that feed live on Twitter @ShellAlexander, or it turns into a podcast which you can listen to the next day on your commute, your morning commute. Find out what you missed. Find out the takes on what happened in the Raptor game the night before. Again, you can find that on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play by searching On Blast Podcast. And again, YouTube, watch videos, like, comment. Tell me how bad my voice sounds. And yes, hopefully enjoyed this edition of the Ball on Blast podcast, which, me and Webby just go through a lot of NBA talk, right, Webby?
Yeah, man. Like we've said earlier, man, there's something that happens every night. Okay.
Something that happens every night in the NBA, and this is the place where you can hear us talk about it each and every week. Again, I am Sheldon Alexander, and as a wise man once said, I really did used to pray for times like this, to rhyme like this. This is the Ball on Blast podcast, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.
Peace.
On blast.